the Dean, for inviting me here. So today, the topic that I wanted to talk about is affect. A-F-F-E-C-T. It's written like effect, but pronounced slightly differently as affect. What is affect is basically in very simple terms. So it's a little complicated, but I'll try to simplify it a little bit. And it's emotions. So usually in the scientific community and in sciences and even in social sciences, the practice was that keep emotions out of research. Keep emotions, they are not the focus of attention. So you focus on intellect, you focus on rationality, you focus on thought. But gradually there was this realization, and especially in the last 10 to 15 years, that no, you cannot keep emotions out. Emotions are part of us, and we need to study emotions because they can tell a lot about us. They can tell us how we see the world, how we react to the world, and what can we do about the world? How can we bring a change? So emotions are a legitimate area of research that we need to do that. This doesn't mean that emotion was totally neglected. Emotions weren't, but they were not the focus. So for example, if you look at Marx's writing, Karl Marx, he talks a lot about emotions and how capitalism affects us emotionally, how labor, when exploited, feels. They feel sadness, they are not interested in all these kind of things. Emotions are something that are, so they're present in literature and in different kind of writing. So I gave the example of Marx. There is also example of Walter Benjamin, where he talks about how the urban life affects us. Anyway, I won't go into that, but I'll give you a good example of Proust, a French novelist, very famous, if you have heard of him, and his famous book is called À la recherche du temps perdu, which English translation is In Search of Lost Times. So I'll tell you a story that will elucidate, clarify what I'm talking about. I'll give you a number of examples. So by the end of this session, you would learn something if you're new to this area. So don't worry, just bear with me. I'll give you examples and clarify things. À la recherche du temps perdu, Proust talks about how he couldn't remember his childhood or part of his childhood. And he tried hard, but he couldn't remember it. That street or something that he wanted to recall, or how that life was. And it wasn't that early in his life that he couldn't recall. So he wanted to recall that, and he couldn't succeed in that. And one day he was eating a biscuit, a medine, a kind of a biscuit, French biscuit, a pastry. And he was eating it, and the taste of it and the feeling when you eat a cookie or you eat a biscuit or something, there is this taste in your mouth and there's this feeling that evokes and all these kind of things, the pleasure or whatever. And when he ate, bit the biscuit, he realized, suddenly that memory came to him because he had eaten the same biscuit when he was the child, when he was trying to remember. So immediately all the memories came flooding in. So Proust says that what he couldn't remember rationally, it was there in his body in kind of this feeling and emotion which the biscuit evoked and took it there. So that is an example of how emotions are in our body, because pleasure, eating something, tasting it, then pleasure, it's all emotions, right? Emotions are different kinds, sadness, happiness, calm, all these kind of emotions are there. Now, so I'll give you another example of how emotions are significant. So sometimes you walk into, you meet somebody, okay? You have never met a person before. It's your first time. Okay, when you meet that person, there is some kind of feeling in you. You cannot explain it, but you either like that person or dislike that person or something. It gives you some kind of what they call vibes, right? In ordinary conversation, it gives you. So you meet the person for the first time, but you immediately feel that you are attracted to the person or you are not, or it gives you think the person is weird or all these kind of things. Now you haven't processed it in your head. It's just a feeling that came to you. You later on realize, oh, this person, I felt that way because this person looked like my teacher who was very nice to me, and somehow his eyes are like my teacher, and that's why I kind of like this person, or I felt good to meet this person. So you rationalize it much later. So what it means is that emotions are much quicker. They are very fast. They give you information much faster than your thoughts, than your intellect. You later, oh, that's why I felt this way. But your body immediately connected, immediately knew it. Or somebody you don't like and you say, oh, that is a person who, when I was a child, this person, that person who was very not very nice to me looked like this person, and you connect. Or this person looked like my mother, or this person looks my father, or all these kind of things. Or you go to a situation, a building or something, you don't like the building, or you like the building. All these kind of things are given, then information comes to you through emotions very fast, much faster than your intellect can provide. Okay, sometimes, and emotions are also the information that emotions give you is pre-verbal, verbal, that is before language. Sometimes somebody saying something and you feel, for example, I'm giving this lecture and you feel in a certain way about me or my lecture or something, and you don't even have words for that because it's felt emotionally and the mind is much slower. It has to catch up. So you have to invent, you have to create a vocabulary for it. You have to create words for it. Or for example, look at it this way. For example, times have changed. The way our parents lived, the way economy was in our times of our parents is much different than us, than we have it now. And while this change is coming, we haven't yet invented a language. We haven't yet created a vocabulary or expression to explain how we feel, because the emotions are much faster than the thought. Okay, I don't want to complicate it because there's a lot of complication in it. But now using this, I hope you understood this part, but I want to come to this concept, this called cruel optimism, which is one of the ways to investigate affect, emotion. Affect is emotions, right? So cruel optimism, a concept by Lauren Berlant, a literary scholar who recently died some 2 years ago. Berlant talks about cruel optimism. Cruel optimism works like this. Sometimes you attach a certain kind of expectations from an object. For example, you like something, you like a car or a new house or anything, a new piece of furniture, or a new degree, or you want to have a doctorate degree, and you say that the life will be just amazing if I can get that, right? The object evokes in you a certain kind of feelings and emotions. If I have this laptop or I have this cell phone or whatever, I will be just, life will be so nice. I'll just sit in this house and this new nice house, or I'll drive this shiny car and people will look at me and I'll feel so special and all this kind of thing. Now that object evokes a certain kind of emotions in you, right? If you can get it and it doesn't destroy you, well and good. But most of the time what happens is when you desire such kind of things, this desire, these emotions destroy you in the process. These emotions destroy you in the process in this way. For example, like American Dream, the people give an example of American Dream. I lived for a long time in the US, so I'll give you an example from that. A lot of people go to the US, immigrate to the US with the hope that they will have a good life. The good life, whatever that means. having a husband or a wife or a house or whatever they expect. And in the process, in having the good life, they go there, they cannot see their family. If their spouses in for example, in Pakistan, they don't see their children for a long time because they have to wait for the visa, because they cannot come back. Otherwise, they will not be given re-entry and so many things. And they have to struggle and they have to waste their life in this, all this kind of labor. They cannot pursue their, but in the process, that desire destroys you. This is called cruel optimism. When you expect that attaining an object or having that object will fulfill your life, but in the process, it destroys you. And usually, when we have these attachments, this attachment to the thing, whether it's a car or it's a good life or whatever, it's usually emotional. It's not intellectual. It's not. Your mind might, when your heart is convinced, what we usually say, when your heart is convinced and the mind follows, that kind of a thing, sometimes a lot of our decisions and a lot of our way we lead our life make these connections, attachments are emotional. So why keep emotion out of investigation when it is so important? You like a political party, you like a particular politician. You don't, first you like a politician because how the politician looks, how do you think about the politician, and so many other things. They come and then they color your thoughts. Then they make you more inclined towards hating the politician or loving the politician. Coming out on the street for that politician or not coming out on the street for, fighting with somebody else, debating based on these emotional attachments. So when emotional attachments are that important, it has such a tremendous effect on your life, then they should be a legitimate area of study and investigation. So in the past, when scientists said, oh, emotions are something that we don't do, and especially in a masculine culture, oh, emotion is something that women do, men don't do it. Men are cool and calm and all these kind of things. Whereas cool and calm is also an emotion. So that thing is gone. Now we are in this time which we call affective turn. That affect have become prominent. Affect have become central. And in Eastern philosophy, Muslim philosophy, Chinese philosophy, Arab, South Asian, we have this tradition of talking about affect. We have this tradition of giving importance to emotion. West is now catching up. And the point also related to this is that there is a lot of wisdom in Eastern cultures, Eastern philosophy. Usually we say, oh, what has East given us to the world? Everything is done by the West, all this scientific. No, that is a very wrong argument. That if you look at the world history, coming from anthropology, if you look at the world history, where was language invented first? Language was invented first in Mesopotamia, Iraq, Egypt, and China. These are the three places where languages were invented. Now, language is a written language. Sorry, language is not invented. Written language, right? The written language writing system. These were invented. It's a huge discovery. There's so many other things that the civilization, the successful civilization in Iraq, and Mesopotamia, South Asia, Indus civilization, Chinese civilization, all these different kinds of these are there. They gave us a lot of info, and they're still, and we are now moving back because they have a lot of wisdom. We have been in this kind of propaganda or perception. So coming back, this affect is a very good example of the prime, again, going back to the Eastern philosophy, going back to finding meaning and all these kind of things in our own cultures, in our own lived experiences, and not just blindly following whatever is the new craze, new something in Western theory, because those theories reflect their states. So we have to come up with our own theories, our own interests that reflect our problems. What are we struggling with? What is our focus? Now, your job, if you are investigating affects and emotions, Would you mind if we start with the question answer session? And
so can I have a question here, please?
yes.
Okay, Dr. It's wonderful to hear you today. So my first question is that what I think that emotions, they are the integral part of the human personality. We cannot deny them. And we are emotional animal as we are rational animal. So what do you think? What I think is that in our community, especially in Pakistani setting, mostly emotions are socio-cultural constructed phenomena.
What this is also a distinction between affect and emotions, okay, which I didn't want to go into, but now I can. So emotions are important in the sense, so there is a distinction between affect and emotions. Emotions are culturally mediated. By this I mean is, for example, if if you look at a funeral in your culture, in our culture, you'll go, for example, if you look at a funeral in a Pashtun culture, sadness is expressed in a totally different way. Okay, so usually what would happen is, typically when the dead body is brought in, or when the dead, so the woman express in a certain way, men express their grief in a certain way. It's culturally performed, it's culturally mediated. Woman would usually throw their head covering, and they will wail, and they might, what we call psalm, they might kind of sing, they become very poetic. Oh, they cry to the dead body and say, oh, you used to do this to me, you used to do, they kind of, it's very poetic. Now that is a certain way of grief. You cannot imagine somebody from the West in England doing the same way. This doesn't mean that one is superior or inferior. It means that there are different ways, both feel the same affect, but the expression of affect is socially, culturally mediated in a certain way. We express anger in different ways, in different cultures. We express sadness, grief, happiness, right? All these are expressed in a different way. So yes, affect are very much part of human body, human experience, but at the same time, we need to know that affect are culturally mediated and they are expressed in a certain way depending upon how we learn to express those emotions. Yes, I hope I answered that question.
Okay, Dr. Taimur, one more question. As you have said that this cruel optimism we face since the stage of our childhood, and it continues still, rather throughout our life. So how do we manage this cruel optimism? Because we have expectations in childhood, we had one kind of expectation, and then when we grow up, so our expectations, they just change and they keep on increasing. They adopt a different shape. So what do you think? How to face or how to handle this issue of cruel optimism? Don't you think that if we face this cruel nature of optimism, we become the victim of extreme level of neurosis?
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing with this cruel optimism is, and that's where the change can come. That's where emotions can become the central focus of how to make a society better. Because most of the time we are locked in this relationship, which is actually cruel optimism. We think that something will give us happiness, complete our life, but it's actually destroying us. So the thing is that most of the time we have to investigate that day. If you read Quran, if you read Quran, I was reading it the other day, and I some verse which says that the paraphrase of that is, sometime we think that we ask God that give me this, we think that it will give us, it's good for us, but actually it's bad for us, right? So that kind of a thing, where you need to identify, you need to investigate, am I locked in a cruel optimistic relationship? Who is benefiting from this relationship? For example, if you look at it from the labor perspective, the labor in a capitalist structure, it tells me, oh, you need to work and work, and when you work and you spend this time, then you will have a good life. But for most of us, we never have a good life. We never end up owning a house. We never have a nice living standard. We are all day, rest of our life struggling, whereas these rich people get richer. So what is it happening here is that you say that, well, you have been given an object like a carrot dangling in front of a donkey, right? The donkey said that I'll get to the carrot, but the carrot moves with the donkey, so it never gets to the carrot, right? So similarly, this thing is in front of us to make us work without any, and just given us this false hope that, okay, one day I will have this, one day I will have this, if I work harder, if I work longer, and all these kinds of things. So the thing is that you realize that this is cruel optimism, break it, get out of that, get out of that relationship and question it, that somebody else is benefiting. So I've been locked in this cruel optimistic relationship. But there is a point. Sometimes that relationship has become so integral to you that you cannot break out of it. If you break out of it, your life becomes meaningless. For example, I give you an example. If somebody goes to the US, they are struggling to get the documents, the citizenship. They spend 20 years, they still don't have a citizenship. If they go back, they will never be able to enter. Now, since they have spent 20 years there, they have lost touch with community back home. If he goes back to his village, people will not probably recognize him, or the people who recognize him are much older. The younger generation is totally doesn't recognize this person, all these kind of things. This person hasn't lived in the community, doesn't know the changes, what all these kind of things. It's just new person in a new country, neither here nor there, na idhar ke rahe na udhar ke rahe, right? That kind of a situation. Breaking off the cruel optimism and coming back home can be very hard, because they would just have to face the fact that they wasted 20 years of their life. And just that fact would just break them. So they keep telling themselves that, okay, no, it's worth it. I'm going to spend 10 more years or 5 more. It will happen. It will happen. It will happen. So in that way, they're just giving themselves, they are better off in that relationship of cruel optimism, because if they break out of it, they will realize how messed up their life has been, that they will just lose heart. Anything can, they can commit suicide, they can just lose hope, they can do all this kind of thing when day-to-day life becomes impossible. So the point is identifying the cruel optimistic relationship. I can go into a number of political examples and all this kind of thing, but I will not talk about that. But you can think about it, how politically, what does it mean? Our political situation, our country, what kind of cruel optimism is given to us? What kind of cruel optimism is given to people in the UK, people in the US? In all these developed countries, they have been given these cruel optimisms. They've been given these false hopes to extract labor from them, to benefit from them, while their lives are destroyed. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Taimur. Yes. Any other question? Yes.
Yes,
any
please.
question?
So my second question is that it is in relation to literature. Being a student of literature or being a teacher of literature, most of the literary writers, they depict life in a very idealized way. They actually depict the life in a sort of variant that is unachieved and unobtained. And in this way, mostly, particularly students, they try to imitate and expect that idealized version of life in their own life, which they are unable to achieve. So how to balance emotions, being student as well as teacher of literature? So how emotions can be maintained and sustained for a good life?
Yes, so how to make better attachments, how to make, because if you have these cruel attachments, they're eventually going to destroy you. That's why they're cruel. All attachments are not cruel. Some attachments are cruel. So you have to recognize that it's a cruel, optimistic relationship. How to recognize that? That is then in literature. There are, especially in contemporary times, in what we call neoliberal capitalism, or a nationalism, or state ideology, and all these kind of things, we need to see, look at different kind of case studies where these optimism are given to us. For example, I'll give you an example of how We have often been told that if you work hard, you will succeed. It's often said, but it's a lie if you look at it. In some cases, yes, but there are a lot of people who are not privileged, who don't go to elite university, whose parents don't have good money to send them to private schools. No matter how hard they try, they cannot catch up with those people who are privileged, and for them, all this comes easily. They don't have good access to good teachers, good all these kind of things. So that gives you a false hope that as if you work hard, you will succeed, and deflects you from the injustices in the society, the privileges, the hierarchies, the inaccessibility to different kind of. Some people are treated as more important than others. They have more access to resources, and you are given a lie that if you can do this. So recognizing this system, that actually this is a lie and this is not true. We have to actually work for accessible education. Everybody gets quality of education, irrespective of whether your parents are rich or not. Everybody gets good quality health. Everybody gets good residence, all these kind of things. So questioning these things, what have I been told, what I have been given by the society is that a cruel attachment. Investigating that. You can investigate that in literature, you can investigate different ways, because this is not the scope of what we are going to talk about, so I can't go into the detail, but with that comes understanding your environment, social theory, and so many things, and investigating it.
Dr. Taimur, I think that we would conclude your session at this stage. Thank you very much that you spared time for us, for our students, for our university. You remain part of this session, and I hope that in future we have a regular seminar every semester. So if you can give us time, we will try to involve you in our sessions. This was a fruitful session, a productive session, and wish you to see you again in the next semester. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day. Thank you.